How's Miami?
Oh, it's amazing. No complaints. No complaints. How's Vegas?
Dude, it's getting hot. It's heating up, man.
Yeah.
Starting to heat up for sure. So, but no, it's good, man. I mean, like they say, it's a dry heat, so it's pretty comfortable. I mean, in Atlanta, when I used to like run cross country, for example, in high school, and it was like so crazy. It's like so hot. It might be like in the 90s, but man, I mean, it would beat you down. It's crazy. So I'm sure Miami's pretty humid as well, right?
Oh, it definitely gets humid, but apparently we're in the dry season right now. I've only ever grown up with four seasons, and apparently here they just have two. They have the wet season and they have the dry season, and then
Oh,
hurricane is kind of part of both, I guess. I don't know. I'm too.
how's a hurricane dry? I don't know. I'm not a meteorologist. How would I know?
Yeah, that's it's a
That's cool,
little.
man. You only moved there recently, though, right?
Yeah, I just got here in January because my girlfriend started a job down here, and yeah, I love the sunshine, so I'm no complaints down here if I get to get outside every day, get on my bike.
Yeah.
But what about
Yeah,
you? What made you
man.
move to Las
You
Vegas?
you like cycle as well? It seems like there's so many people like at Solidworks and also like always in our chat that like do a lot of cycling.
Yeah, I'm not like an avid cyclist. I wouldn't call myself a cyclist. I just bought a Trek hybrid to try to lose some pounds last year. I
Yeah.
like getting out there. I'm not hardcore like some of the people out here.
I
But
mean, do
I'm
you
like,
have like the spandex and like the suit and everything, or
no, that's why I said I wouldn't call myself a cyclist because
okay,
I
all
don't
right,
go
that
that
makes sense.
far.
Yeah. If you don't have the suit, then I don't know that we can call you a cyclist. I think you need the suit first.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Dude, I'm really excited about your live design today. I know you told me a little bit about it, and it's kind of like a blend of like engineering and art. And I was something that popped up like in my feed recently that I was reading about is something called DALL-E 2. Have you heard of DALL-E?
No, I've never heard of it.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So this is like a product from OpenAI, which is like, trying to figure out how we can, create AI and make it like ethical and helpful for humans and, not destroy us all, right? So, but it's a pretty cool application. I sent you the link. Check out that website. But it's what it does, if you scroll down there a little bit, you're gonna find something pretty cool. Is this right here? Yeah, right there. So what this thing does is like it'll take there was a version one of this, and it would just take any kind of prompts you put in there, like avocado chair, and it would make some sort of like rendering of it, maybe a cartoon rendering or something like that. But with this
Wow.
new version of it, it's gotten even more advanced. So it makes like very high definition, like almost photorealistic renderings of things that have never existed before. So like this one's showing an astronaut riding a horse in a photorealistic style. But if you click on like in the style of Andy Warhol, it'll like create astronauts riding horses in the style of Andy Warhol, which is pretty wild.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And it's kind of weird. You would think, okay, like it's probably just taking pictures from the internet and sort of mashing them together, but
Right.
I don't know that I've ever seen a picture of an astronaut on a horse. So it's definitely got some sort of like intelligence or some sort of like creativity in there that it's using to generate these images, which I think is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Wow. So AI, computers are also it's nuts.
Yeah, this I think is
Wow. They even like lighting too. Like look at the lighting in this. Like it's clearly light coming from behind. Like it doesn't look like it was just dragged in from Google Images or something, and just thrown on with a space background. Like it actually
yeah.
looks like somebody made this. That's
And there's
pretty
all
interesting.
the like that's such a good point. Like I mean there's all these like sort of choices that an artist would make if they were going to create this, like where did the lighting comes from and all that sort of stuff. And like this AI is making those choices, which is kind of crazy to think about that it's becoming like advanced to the point where, I don't know. I always thought, art would be the last vestige for AI, but it seems like it's doing it just fine. And you could use things like this, like in marketing materials or whatever. And like, or you could use it as inspiration for, some sort of marketing stuff. But I don't know, it's pretty exciting. Like, it's kind of interesting how advanced this stuff becomes so quickly.
It is. It's impressive, honestly. And I was with you. I never thought that AI would be, you know, making art this soon. I thought it'd probably take over before that happens, but that's
Yeah, I'm
really, really cool.
always blown away by stuff like this. But well, cool. Yeah, let's get into the show here.
Yeah.
We can always come back to this, but I just thought it was kind of like an interesting, interesting application of something where you have like, engineering or sciences kind of mixed with like, art. And, I don't know. I always appreciate things like that. I think is really cool. But let me introduce the show, and we'll come right back to you, John.
Yeah, well, let's do it.
Cool. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on another SolidWorks Live Design. I'm Mark Peterson. I'm an industry process consultant here at SolidWorks. And we're going to do just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. So, something that I would really appreciate everyone out there do, if you don't mind, drop a like on this video, subscribe, share, all that kind of good stuff. That just sort of helps us recognize what type of content you guys like to see us doing, as well as, also promotes this stuff so everybody can benefit from kind of the cool stuff that we get to show here on Live Design. So definitely do that for us. And I'm happy to see a bunch of people already commenting in the chat, so we will keep monitoring that. Let us know where you're from in the chat, and get the keyboard fingers going, and let us know. Juan is from Peru. Welcome, Juan. Appreciate you being here. I was in Lima not too long ago. It's a beautiful place. Really enjoyed Peru. What a great place to get to enjoy yourself. Very beautiful there. So. Paulo from Brazil, thank you for joining us. Appreciate that. Yeah, guys, interact with us in the chat throughout. We're going to be taking questions, at the end. So any questions you have for Gian, definitely ask those in the chat as well. So speaking of Gian, welcome. Gian is also an industry process consultant here at SolidWorks. We work actually really closely together all the time, and we bring content to you guys like on our website, on YouTube, that sort of thing. So we love doing this job. It's a lot of fun. John, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, Mark. Thank you for having me here. Like you said, we're always working together, and I'm really excited to show a few personal projects that I don't really get to put on camera very much because they're kind of work adjacent. They're not necessarily something I would put on the SolidWorks website, but got a couple things I'm excited to show today.
It's actually really smart, John. If you work on personal stuff during work time, all you have to do is just show it on a live stream, and then it's totally legit.
There you go.
Yeah.
So yeah,
well, cool. Yeah. Let us know what you're going to be working on today, or showing us today.
Well, today I want to get into a couple things that I made in xShape. Specifically, I have 5 big lessons or tips that I've learned along the way using xShape in a lot of different personal projects. But really, I kind of wanted to start the conversation from a higher level, more what you were talking about, Mark, how engineering and art, like that point where those two roads cross. So I figured, why not show a little bit of some of the 2D art that I've created in the past couple years. I don't know about you, Mark, but I've always had a sketchbook. I always am sketching things out in my notebook when I was in class in high school and college. I don't know. Do you ever get that as an engineer?
Yeah, I always felt like my brother had like more of the artistic, aspects in our family. But yeah, after I started kind of learning like engineering drawings and stuff, I really kind of started doing more of that, more doodling, more sketching. So yeah, definitely a ton of fun.
Yeah, so I took it from what was a lot of sketching. Like if you ever looked at some of my notebooks from high school, it's probably more sketches and doodles than it is actual notes. But I slowly migrated into doing a little bit more fine arts. So I'm going to show you a small sample of some of my 2D works from the last 3 years, actually. So these are all either paintings or pastel. And I think that the oldest one is from 2018. I want to say that that's this Johnny Cash in the lower right-hand corner.
Very cool.
So that guy's pastel. this Frank Sinatra's pastel, and then all the rest are acrylic that I just started painting with acrylic in the last couple years, just as a new medium, trying to experiment with a little more color and have a little bit more fun with it. So that's been really fun so far to just experiment with a new medium.
Wow,
And
man.
you know who this is?
What's that?
You know who this is? Top left.
No, who? Oh, is that Andre?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Eric Andre.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar. He does like kind of sketch comedy, right?
Yeah, he does. He does. He does stand up too. His stand up is, I'm not a fan, but his sketch comedy is ridiculous and crazy and hilarious if you're into it. It's not for everyone though. So
Yeah. That picture of Biggie looked familiar for some reason.
yeah, it's from one of his like classic shots, like his classic the picture of him in the crown. So I kind of replicated that with a different background and did different things to the crown, everything. It did some different things with the colors. But yeah, that's about it. I have a ton more work too, but most of the stuff that I thought was appropriate for here, I figured is these 6 or so. And I got a little surprise for you, Mark. I've started making time lapses of me making my artwork. So I'll show you a quick clip.
Yeah, let's see it.
So this is just for the Eric Andre one. This is the making of this in my parents' house. This took maybe 10 or 12 hours or so to make. Just about a 1-minute clip, and all I did was use black and white acrylic paint, and yeah, just gridded it out on a 2 foot by 2 foot canvas. All those things you just saw were at least 2 feet wide or so. I like to work big.
Wow.
And yeah, it's
That's incredible, man. It only took you 12 hours. It looks like something that would have taken like several days. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely over the course of a few days. It was like 4 hours here, 4 hours there. But it's really cool to just see it all come together at the end. So making these time lapses has been just so much fun to be able to do. Like
Yeah, man.
And it's cool looking back. You know, I'd say the only social media platform that I'm on consistently is Reddit, just to look at other artists and other people that are making things and then showing the time lapse of them making it, which is just amazing. Like I don't know, it's fun to watch them. So I figured I'd have to make a couple and share it with Reddit.
That's awesome, man. While we watch that, let me go back to the chat real quick. Got people from all over here: Indonesia, Australia, Mexico, Italy. We've got people from far off places like Cleveland, even, which is crazy. Canada. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Today, we're just kind of, as you're joining, we're just kind of talking about how, engineering and sciences and art, can kind of come together. And John is just showing us some of what he's put together, some of his own creation, some of his own artwork. I do some artwork myself. I do a little bit of photography. Those are mine back there. I always find that, like, when I talk with engineers, as much as we're like very much, sort of STEM focused, like, hard math, hard science, all that sort of stuff, I find that so many have maybe either an athletic side, like they're doing a lot of like athletic type stuff, biking, working out, things like that, or even an artistic side, which I think is very interesting. And, I guess when I was growing up, I was thinking you could kind of be left-brained or right-brained, but it doesn't seem to be that way. It's just, I think every human feels a natural tendency to want to express themselves. And I think this is a really cool way that you're doing it, John. Anybody that's watching now in the chat, if you have some kind of artistic ability, maybe you like to play an instrument, maybe you like to take photography, maybe you like to draw or do paintings like John, throw that in the chat. Let us know what sort of medium you like to kind of express yourself creatively through. So tell us in the chat. Let us know. Jesse says he loves the lighting on the martini glass too that you made, and I will second that. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was a cool one. That was a cool one to do. It's always interesting trying to capture, the look and feel of glass and liquids like that, yeah. And definitely gives you a good opportunity to play around with color, which is what I did quite a bit with that one. But as you're talking about being an engineer and also having an artistic side is a perfect transition to what I actually want to talk about today, which is xShape. So
Yeah,
our
tell us about xShape.
cloud subsidy modeling. Yeah, let's talk about it. I put together a little highlight reel here that you can see just of making a product using the subdivision surfacing. You know, it's free form subdivision modeling, so a little bit different than the parametric modeling you might be used to. And it's a great complement to parametric design. In product design, you know, whenever you need something that's complex surfaces, you know, the product that I'm making here, which is really just a handle for like a winch, just like an up and down handle. This would have taken a lot longer to create using traditional parametric surfacing, and subdivision modeling just gives me that extra freedom to kind of explore and keep going with my ideas and do more without being so constrained by, you know, having to make sure all my sketches are perfect and perfectly dimensioned. And that makes xShape perfect for not just industrial design, but makers and artists too. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that could benefit from it or have a lot of fun using xShape. And I especially want to call out those makers out there that if you're a maker, you have the Makers 3D Experience SolidWorks, that includes xShape. So if you haven't used it, you should definitely go fire up xShape, and you might even be able to follow along with some of the things that I'm going to do soon in the software.
Yeah, excellent point there. Yeah, anybody that has that maker license, yeah, they're going to have access to this tool. And, you know, just to drive the point home, I mean, this is like a kind of a push and pull, you know, sort of, you know, virtual clay kind of application, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's not as much sketch and feature oriented. It's more, yeah, you start just like what you said, you start with a hunk of clay and you just push and pull. And that's like 90% of it. So I guarantee you, even if you're not an artist or an engineer, you could get up and running with xShape in a very short amount of time, especially if you follow the tips that I'm going to get to.
That's cool. Yeah, and in the chat, people were telling me, like Kermy44, I do charcoal. Laszlo216, he's a sculptor. Amy Peterson, also doing some sculpture as well as acrylic paint too. So it looks like some of the people that are watching right now could go from, you know, physical sculpting and physical artwork into kind of a virtual sculpting using xShape, right?
Yeah, it's perfect for that. In fact, that's why I use xShape so much, because sculpting in real life is a little bit more messy and can be a little more expensive than doing it just on the computer.
Yeah. Sometimes it's fun to get messy though, but yeah, this keeps things clean for sure.
It is. Yeah, it definitely keeps it a little cleaner. So I figured I'd throw together a little sample of some of the cool things that I've made in xShape so far. And then of those, we'll take a deeper dive into just a few of them. So here's a little sample of some of the things that I've made in xShape before, whether it be product focused or more just personal projects, things that I just mess around with. You know, there's so many different things that you can shape. Like, it's truly one of those apps that you can just make anything. So I've tried to make quite a bit, as you can tell here.
These are all yours.
Yep. These are all things I've made. Some of them are a combination of XDesign as well, but you know, they're all mostly xShape. You know, obviously the tire rims and some of the more mechanical things, I definitely used more XDesign or SolidWorks. But yeah, xShape was a crucial part of all of the designs up here.
Right.
And it's fun to use.
Yeah, xDesign being the parametric modeling app is kind of more closely related to SolidWorks than xShape, which is the kind of push-pull thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, these are really cool. I like the sun. I like the sun thing. That's like kind of like a piece of jewelry or something?
Yeah. Actually, I designed that as a piece of jewelry, and basically what I learned is that it was going to be a little too expensive to have that made in real life at a size that was small enough for somebody to wear, but detailed enough for you to actually get everything that was in, like, because it's a whole face, you know, it's not just a circle with some rays.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. I mean, you don't just create these things and you're just happy with it like that. You actually want to get some of these things created in real life too.
Exactly. And that's why it's perfect for me to lead into the three that I either have or I'm planning to make in real life out of these, which are these three right here. So I'll start with the first one, which is this ring, which I initially made back in 2018 when I was just an intern for Solidworks. And I made this in Solidworks Desktop because I was inspired. My manager at the time, this guy, Marlon Banta, super smart person. He works on a lot of the sim products, PhotoView 360, but his hands are all over Solidworks Desktop. And I remember stumbling upon a video of him designing and then fabricating an engagement ring that he made for his wife. And he designed the whole thing in SolidWorks, and he had like pictures of the whole process. So I was inspired to try and make something myself. So I designed this ring using just one revolve in SolidWorks, and then I used a bunch of splines to cut the holes through it and just pattern them around and filleted the crap out of it until it was ready to, render and then actually make it in real life. So
that's impressive. So all those holes that you put in there, those were like manually created using splines.
They were, but it was a pattern. So I didn't actually. I think it might have been a wrap around. So it wasn't like I made every single one of those. I probably made 10% of the holes there, and then just patterned the rest around or wrapped them.
It looks amazing, and you actually got that physically manufactured. I mean, I could only assume the only manufacturing method that would work with something like this would probably be 3D printing. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. That is how it was made. And here's a couple other pictures of the final product. But I've used a couple different companies to have things made before, especially now that I'm remote and I don't have access to like the 3D printers that we have at the SolidWorks office in Boston. So I've made a couple things through these two companies. One is called Shapeways and one is called Xometry. I've had things made from both, but there's a lot of suppliers out there online that you just submit a step file or an STL or something and you'll get an instant quote, and then you choose the material you want and boom, you get it made and have it sent to you in like, a few weeks. So they've been able to do some pretty cool things, and they do a lot of 3D printing with metal there, which is just so cool.
That's really cool. Muriel says, I like the ring. And Jesse says that he did an engagement ring for his wife in SolidWorks as well. So pretty cool stuff.
Wow. Yeah, I guess that's the thing, man. If you're a SolidWorks guy, then you got to make your own ring now.
Yeah, I never thought to do it, but yeah, I mean, that's obviously, I mean, that's turned out really, really well. And in fact, those previous images, I mean, were those pictures or those renderings? I sometimes can't tell anymore.
Oh, these are pictures of the real thing, and
yeah,
just on my parents' like countertop. So that's why it's not. I don't have these physically with me, or else I would have taken some better pictures. But yeah,
it looks amazing, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it came nice. I like both of the materials. The one on the left is a pure silver, and then the one on the right is a bronze with like a satin finish, not too polished. Basically because I wanted to make it for my girlfriend, and I wanted her to kind of have an option because I wasn't sure which one she was going to like. Mm-hmm. And then the other one I think I gave to my mom because she's never gonna turn away a free piece of jewelry, especially if it's made by her son.
Poor mom. That's cool though. Yeah. So I mean, if somebody gave me something like that, I'd be totally floored. That's really cool. I mean, what an incredible way to like give somebody a gift. It's not like something you just bought at a jewelry store somewhere. Like you actually physically made this thing and put a lot of time and effort into it. So it's a very, very cool gift.
Yeah, and speaking of it being a gift, is the next one is this pendant that I made, which is actually a Mother's Day gift. So I hope you're not watching, Mom, but if you are, sorry if I just spoiled the surprise. This is what you're getting in another week. But it's this pendant that was, it's two elephants, like a mother and a child, and it was inspired from a sculpture that I made when I was back in middle school that my mom kept all these years, and she still has it like in her office back home in Rhode Island, and she loves it so much. So I figured, why not turn it into something that she can wear? So here's what the actual sculpture was. So my mom signed me up for this totally random, that there was like a soapstone carving class for middle schoolers at the time for like 2 or 3 weeks in the summer. But yeah, they gave us a hunk of soapstone. They had us make a bunch of different things throughout the summer. But there was like one main project to make along, you know, your final deliverable had to be something nature inspired that was one solid piece. So this is about maybe 4 or 5 inches tall and wide, just a couple different angles of the same thing. But it was cool. It was a lot of fun. I'll tell you, carving anything out of stone is pretty demanding physically. You know, you can't be afraid to get dirty and sweaty and really get in there and start carving stuff out.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've done some like whittling, like with wood, but I mean, stone. I mean, that seems crazy. That must be incredibly, yeah, physically intensive.
Well, it's interesting because you saw off chunks of it, and then you just have these little metal tools that have, I don't know, they're maybe an inch long, or at least the part where you're like carving things out of the stone. And yeah, this took some time. That's for sure. But I took this idea, took this concept, and I turned it into this pendant in 2 pieces. So they're like already interlocked. And then here, I just got it delivered last week. It just came in. This one was from Shapeways. And I think that I'm going to use a different chain. I just wanted to see how it looked on my girlfriend. So there's a picture of my girlfriend wearing it with just this little like leather cord that I got. And I actually have the physical thing here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this in my camera, but I do have it here with me as well.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's perfect. Wow.
Yeah,
So you made this in SolidWorks too, or what did you use to make this this design?
So this one purely xShape. That's all it was. It was 6 different subdivision bodies. It was that whole main base that kind of is encompassing everything. The link that you connect to like the chain, and then it was 2 bodies for each elephant. You know, the head of the big elephant, the body of the big elephant, and then the head and body of the small elephant. So like 6 bodies total, just manipulating them around until I liked it, and then yeah, exported it as a step file and got it printed.
Okay. Yeah, definitely something like this was somebody said in the chat that, you know, this could have been done with Paolo says you could do lost wax casting for some of these, but in your case, it's just easier to just take the export and just send it off to somebody to get 3D printed, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That is how I've done it. And I don't know if it's only 3D printed or wax casted because I haven't asked what process they've used to make it, but I know some of the things are simple enough for them to just do wax casting at that company that I'm using. But yeah, it's so rewarding just to see your designs actually get made. And yeah, I'm excited to see what my mom thinks when she gets this in a couple weeks.
I think she's going to really like it, John. It's something tells me that she's going to be pretty happy with the gift.
Yeah, well, we'll hope so. And of course, I had to make 2 again, just so I don't want my girlfriend to feel left out. So I made her one as well.
Yeah, good. That's a smart move. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the chat here real quick. Andrew says our wedding rings were designed in SolidWorks, 3D printed, and lost plastic casted in palladium. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a Suresh says that makes very creative. So I think he's giving you a big compliment there. The McBobble says I was going to say I love the interlock. So a lot of big comments coming through here. You know, saying he did a great job on these. Greg was wondering what process was used for the polishing.
For the polishing, so the company that I used, it's an add-on to do any type of polishing. So they didn't really give much detail. You just had to pay a little extra for fine detail polishing. I don't know what process they actually used for that, though. That's a good question. I'll have to look into that for next time.
Okay. Yeah. So either way, for you, the process was click a checkbox and, you know, pay $1 or $2 extra for some, you know, post work on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool, man.
Nice and simple for me. But yeah, on to the main thing that I want to show today, this sculpture that I've made, which I haven't figured out how I'm going to make it yet in real life. But I'm really excited about the whole process for designing this so far. It's not going to be as easy as just clicking a checkbox and hitting submit this time, but we will see. So this is a sculpture that I made because I just moved to Miami. I don't really have any artwork down here, but we have a lot of plants in our apartment now, me and my girlfriend and I. So I figured, why not make a wall sculpture that looks like, you know, two hands actually watering a plant. So that's what I created here. And here, I'll show you a better view of that. Let's zoom in a little bit. So two different views of that same design that I made. And this is all xShape. So this is 3 different bodies in xShape. And Jesse Sprague actually helped me render this. Got to give a big shout out to him. He actually put in this water effect, which just looks so cool to me.
Wow, yeah. That really brings it to life.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. I thought about trying to like seal it and I don't know, maybe turn it into like an automatic watering device, but I think I'm just going to keep it a wall sculpture for now and see how far we get with that.
It sounds incredibly involved, but yeah, I mean, you know, get it on the wall first, then go from there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, big shout out to Jesse Sprague for the help with that. And I was inspired by this for a couple of reasons. The first thing that inspired me was a session that I did with Jordan Tadich back, I want to say last March, that was all about the more advanced workflow features and workflows of xShape. It was called Get Flexible with 3D Sculptor. There's a link to that session in the description of this YouTube video, and so you can watch it there. But big thank you to Jordan for joining us that session and showing us how he created the LN4 hand, which was it's a project to make prosthetic hands and limbs and make them so that they're accessible all over the world. So anybody can, you know, take the file and make it. And Jordan, of course, could give more details about that, but the focus was a little bit different. It was a little bit more on function, whereas I decided, all right, I want to try to make this a lot more with a fine arts approach and try to make a hand that's, you know, very realistic. So I made a hand and then it turned into making different positions of the hands. And then somehow I eventually had the idea to actually put like a vase in there and have it look like it's pouring out water. So that was how the idea came to be. And I want to give one more shout out to Rob Jost, because his magic wheelchair story, how he made that. And I'm going to show another picture. So Magic Wheelchair, if you're not familiar, it's a nonprofit that builds epic costumes for kiddos in wheelchairs at no cost to the family. And the latest project that the Solidworks team has done up in Boston, they were paired up with this little girl, Freya, who loves princesses and cats. So that's what the team made. They made her a wheelchair that looks like she's in a castle that's, instead of a horse-drawn castle, it's drawn by cats, because she loves cats. And Rob Jost is this guy. He is the designer and the main creator for those 2 cats. And of course, he had his hands all over the project. It was a huge team effort. He had help from a lot of the rest of that team as well. But Rob is he's the main man behind the cats, and the main man behind xShape, actually, as the product definition engineer for that. So
this is a hilarious picture of Rob. It's just so funny. So these cats were designed in xShape as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, they were modeled totally in xShape. And then what inspired me from this is actually how he made them. So I saw the session on how they actually made this and then revealed it to Freya, and I was inspired to do something similar. So I think what I'm going to do is 3D print this in pieces, just like Rob did. He actually mentioned it was over 100 separate 3D printed pieces for both of those 2 cats. So wow. It's no joke, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's actually really cool. You can see where he's put those like pegs and holes and stuff so that, you know, everything lines up properly. You know, when you actually 3D print it, and then I guess you would probably glue it together or something like that. It's a really interesting approach. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And if you want to check out that whole session on Magic Wheelchair, there's also a link to that in the description of this YouTube video. Highly recommend checking that out. It's a heartfelt story and really an amazing design story too. Uh,
Yeah, I love the magic wheelchair. This is so cool to watch those stories.
yeah, it is a process. It's a challenge. You know, they don't know what they're going to be making or who their kiddo is going to be. They get paired up and told, you know, what that kid likes and figure out something to make them. So definitely a really fun and interesting project. But on to the main event, my top 5 X-Shape tips that I could not have made this sculpture without. Um, these are mostly the fundamentals, so definitely check out the session I did with Jordan, that link in the description for some of the more advanced features. But these top 5 tips could get just about anybody up and running with xShape. And yeah, I'm excited. Should we jump into it?
Hey, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to learn today. So go ahead and hit me with some tips.
All right. So the first one is master the robot. Okay. The robot is like 95% of what you're going to use within xShape. So it's basically just this little manipulator that whenever you grab a face or an edge or a vertice, it's this little manipulator that has some arrows and arcs, and that's like most of what you're going to use in xShape. There's not like a lot of there is an extrude feature, but it's not like, you know, you extrude, you fill it, you create a loft. It's push and pull with this robot. So we have these arrows to translate. We have the arcs that allow you to rotate, and then these points at the end of the arrows that allow you to scale. And you can actually scale in multiple directions at once by clicking multiple of those points. So this is the main tool that we use to, you know, get in there and start messing around with xShape. And the way it orients itself by default will be normal to the direction of, it'll be normal to the surface or point or edge that you create. And then the other 2 arrows will be lateral. And that's by default, but that's not always how we want to use it. This is great when you just need to bump the edge of that knuckle out just a little bit and you just want to pull it out. But there are other ways that we can use to manipulate it. But first, I want to show you what makes this. Why is this the case? So the reason why it's pointing out is because we actually have this cage that has all of the discrete points, you know, kind of like the back workings of the surface you're creating. And you'll see that I actually it's a flat face there. And that's why it's giving me that normal and those 2 lateral and transverse directions based on how the face appears. And I just want to make a quick analogy to those of you who might be familiar with style splines. The sub D surface has these cage faces that drive the behavior of the end surface. And you know, it adjusts with you, but I want to make the comparison to style spline and the control lines. They're totally analogous to each other. So the same way you might use a style spline to sketch out a curve, and then you can use those lines, those construction lines, you can pick and move those by the whole line or just by the points, and it'll change the behavior of the spline. That's essentially all xShape is doing, just in 3 dimensions instead of 2.
That makes so much sense. In fact, when style splines were introduced in SolidWorks, I never went back. I always went to style splines because they're so much easier to control. And while you're controlling them, it's still making like really smooth transitions. You're not getting like crazy abrupt changes in curvature and that sort of thing in your spline. So not only do you have better control, but like you have better control over the curvature, which is so important. So that's such an apt analogy.
Yeah, I can't take full credit for that. Jordan Tadic told me that the first time. I just put a graphic to it is all. But yeah, great analogy. So thanks for that, Jordan. So we can orient the robot separate ways though. So there's 2 other options. I'm going to show you X, Y, Z. So when you go to X, Y, Z mode, all it's doing is just orienting it so that, you know, your X, Y, and Z, those arrows just line up with whatever it is for the whole part. Pretty simple. And it's perfect for when you're going back and forth between orthogonal views. So just doing a quick cut over to when I was making the vase, you know, as I'm just going from view to view, of course, using my shift arrow keys are always a big help. I'm able to stay in XYZ and I don't have to worry about the orientation of the robot changing or or, you know, not being what I want it to be because I know that I'm only going to move in the XYZ direction. So that's, whenever you're in XYZ, highly recommend pick a view and then just go back and forth between your side, your top, your front. But yeah. And then the third option.
This makes a lot of sense. Like you would need to have like these different options for how to orient, you know, the robot, right? So that you can make sure you're pushing and pulling in the right direction, like what you intend to do.
Exactly. And then there's one more. It's called screen. So all it does is lock the robot to the screen. So as I rotate around, I always just have two arrows pointing, you know, north and east, or, you know, up and to the right. But yeah, that's essentially it for robot orientation. The last thing that I want to show you is that, you know, sometimes maybe I want to move this knuckle and the robot is a little too high for where I want it to actually rotate about. So what I can do is move the robot down to where I think that the actual axis of rotation should be, just by clicking on it. So if I click the center of the robot, now it's deactivated. I can move it wherever I want, and I can rotate and scale relative to that new position as soon as I just click on it again. So now I've reactivated it, and now I'm rotating. Yeah, it saves a ton of time, especially when you're doing things that, you know, are a little bit more artistic like this and not as functional. I get into this situation quite a bit, you know, moving around hands and fingers.
That's amazing. Yeah, I actually didn't know that you could do that, and I've been needing exactly that ability. So that's really smart. So you click on the robot to deactivate it, and then because it's deactivated, you can go wherever you want with it.
Exactly. You can actually attach it right to a vertice or right to any entity in the sub-D surface, or you can just do what I did and just say, hey, I just want to drag it down with this arrow for a second and then turn it back on.
I can't wait to try that. That's really cool.
Yeah. All right. So that was it for my first tip. That's master the robot. Super important. You're going to use it a ton. So that's what you want to master first. Now, the second thing is you want to select like a pro. Because you're using the robot, you're making a ton of selections all the time before you actually push and pull anything with the robot. So I have a few tips for how to wield selections the right way and how to just speed up the process of, you know, adding or subtracting to your selections. Or in this case, the first thing I want to show is how we can actually filter our selections. So that's been here for about a year now. It was a great enhancement when we first got it. It's still, I use it all the time, but we're just able to select just faces, just edges, just vertices, or entire loops if we want to. And it's a really handy tool that I use a lot, especially box selecting. So you might notice, just like in SolidWorks, when we box select, if you go from right to left, then we're going to grab everything inside that box as well as anything that is touching that box. Whereas if we select from left to right, again, just like in SolidWorks, now we're only going to grab what's fully encompassed in that box. So that's just another handy thing with getting your selections going and just speeding up, just, you know, not wasting any time. And then adding and subtracting from your selections is so important. Okay, because a lot of the time we are not going to be able to get absolutely everything we want in one box selection, or we might get too much. So it's not a problem because we can actually just add more to it using the add to box selection, or subtract just using the other option. And those are two that I use every single time I'm in xShape. I'm always using those two filters because it's not very frequently that you get the perfect selection just in one box select.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it's way better than the workflow I was using, which is literally to just control select each individual face that I was hoping to grab. So, like that's going to save me a lot of time when I'm definitely going to try that tip out too.
Yeah, you'll like this one too, then, because what I got in the bad habit of was I would try to just box select, but then when you're working with a hand or something that has so much going on with it, you're selecting a lot of things in the background that you can't even see in your view. So a lot of the time when I'm working in xShape, I'll be in select only visible elements so that, I'm only grabbing what I can actually see, and I'm not getting, the ring finger behind this. So I'm just getting the pinky right now. And a couple shortcuts. So if you like that other tip, Mark, to add and subtract to your selection, you're going to like this one because you actually have shortcuts to do it. We can just use the shift key to add to our current box selection, and then, make the changes as we might, start finessing this thing, moving it around. And then we can also, we can subtract from a current selection by holding the Alt key. So those are two just big time savers.
That's really slick.
Yeah.
I love how all the things you're showing me are just actually visible there in the top bar, and I just never explored that or looked at them. But yeah, it's right there in plain sight. But obviously these shortcut keys are definitely going to save a lot of time too. So
yeah, the shortcuts are just big time savers. But yeah, we're almost done. We got a couple more selection tips that I have for you. But just gonna adjust that digit of this knuckle first. All right, so we got the shift key to grab. What I want to show you next is how we can also use the shift key to grab a continuous loop of faces or edges. But one thing I want to point out here, so say I want to grab the 4 faces in between the blue one selected and the one that my mouse is on right now. Well, if I draw an imaginary line down the middle of that face, or across the middle of that face, if I click on the side where the green arrow is pointing, the upper side, it'll actually grab those faces that I just mentioned. But if I grab the one on the lower end, it's actually going to grab the opposite loop. So if I click down here instead, now where the green arrow is pointing, it's actually going to grab the loop from the opposite end. And it's really useful when you need to make big movements of a large area, but you don't want to affect other things that you have going on in the model. Just another selection tip that'll help you just speed up your process.
I didn't know that that's what was happening when I was doing that. I didn't know that the faces had like a bias to them when you were doing selection. So that's that actually clears up a lot of confusion for me.
Yeah, well, I thought the same thing because I thought it just wasn't working at first until somebody explained it to me and said that that's what was happening. I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I need to make sure everybody else knows this. So that's how it made it in today. And then of course you can double click any face to get the entire loop that goes around. And yeah, that is my second tip. That is how you can select like a pro and speed up your design time.
I'm gonna use all those. Those are awesome, man. Thanks for sharing those with us.
Of course. All right, I got 3 more. Don't worry, the first 2 were the longest. But this third one is start simple. Okay, you want to play around with your design when you start out and figure out, kind of figure it out as you go before you try to make a rigid plan of how you're going to attack this. Mess around with xShape first. So play around, then plan it out. And then once you get to a certain point, you might want to just play around again. And that's one of the good things my 4th tip, we'll get into that in a minute, will help with. But the key here is when you're starting with any subdivision body or surface, you don't want to use more loops than you know you're going to need at first. It's better to add them later than it is to start off with too many. So we can control the number of loops when we first add in our subdivision surface here. And for this, I just need 1 in one direction, 2 in another, and I'm leaving 4 different, faces of loops here because I got 4 fingers coming out of this. Otherwise, I would have used less. So I got the palm of my hand, and now here's where I'm going to start extruding. This is where we're actually adding mass to the subdivision surface. So the extrude button, just literally extrudes it out with another face, and then I repeated that for the other fingers and the thumb. And we already have the start of our whole hand now. Getting right into pushing and pulling, and then as we need more control, we just insert more loops. So I need more control over these fingers. So here, I'll just grab one. I'll grab one of the edges, and maybe I want 2 more loops on that. And then just repeat that for all the fingers that I have. And that starts giving us the amount of control we need. We can start kind of finessing this thing into place and making it start to look a little bit more like a hand and not like whatever you would call this right now.
Yeah, that's nice. Those are excellent tips as well. And maybe another analogy to sort of like splines too, right? Because with a spline, you always want to kind of start simple with as few spline points as possible. And if you need more, you just add another one, right?
Exactly. It's always better to start simple. Less is more when it comes to sub D and splines. And then as we need more, so we show how to use loops. That it adds a whole loop around that geometry, but maybe we need more localized control. Like for this example I'm showing right now, I need knuckles. I have a little bump out where my knuckle comes out. So I want to add a little bit more localized control of the geometry there so that, I can get some more of that detail. And I'll repeat that for all the knuckles that I have in here. And of course, I just got to repeat this process for all my fingers. Now, one thing I could have done, which Jordan did in that other session that I mentioned, that the link is in the description, is he had separate sub D surfaces for the palm of the hand and then the individual fingers and the thumb. And I took this approach mainly as a challenge just to see if I could, but also because I thought it would allow me to add a little bit more realism to it. Mm-hmm. Especially like things like this with creased edges, whenever your finger's even slightly bent, you have a crease there on like your inner knuckle. So we can add creased edges and kind of break the continuity of that surface just in that one area. And then what I've shown you is pretty much all I haven't, to get from what I just showed you to the end result, I didn't use any other tools. It's pushing and pulling, it's adding creases, it's inserting and removing loops and subdividing faces. So now it's just time to sculpt, finesse that thing into shape. And I fast forwarded through a lot of this until, we get to a good point with one finger, and then we repeat for all the other fingers until we get the hand starting to look, more like a hand.
That's really cool. So in the chat, we got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So New Fat Mike asks, can you use other coordinate systems for robot control, or does it only use local geometry or global coordinate system?
As of right now, I believe it is the latter. It's only your main coordinate system for the component, and then based on your selection.
Okay. So like the options you showed us, it was like the normal to that surface, normal to the screen, or normal to the global coordinate system.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
But the thing is, you can always move the robot and you can rotate it yourself. So that was the part where I moved it, where I actually physically moved the location of the robot to more of like the joint of the knuckle. You can also rotate or change the position of the robot, how it, how those arrows and everything line up too.
Okay. So you're not stuck to those coordinate systems, it's just a starting point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Paolo asks, can you simplify or transform a hand-scanned mesh for this program? So asking if we can pull mesh geometry into xShape.
So I have pulled a mesh geometry into xShape, and it's a great thing when you're trying to recreate something in reference. But if you're thinking about, taking in mesh data and then clicking a button and it turns into sub D, I don't believe that that's something that we can do at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense because mesh data has got, so much information, so many, 3D points. It's a lot different than this. This is, although there's a lot of 3D points here, they're limited in some ways, right? It's not thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
Exactly. And if it was like an STL file or something and it put a node on every single point, that would be a bear to work with. I wouldn't want to touch that model. That's for sure.
So, however, over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of mesh capabilities and improvements in Solidworks. So I guess there could be sort of a workflow where you bring it into Solidworks, you kind of clean it up a little bit. Maybe you can reduce some of those, mesh or 3D points to maybe some flat planes and that sort of thing. So maybe clean it up with SolidWorks, then you can bring it into xShape, right?
Yeah, that would be a great workflow, especially if you're a maker and you got both included.
Exactly. Yeah, they're both there for you to do that. So, great question. One more question here before we move on. The McBobbles asks, is it possible to superimpose an image in the background to guide the sculpting? So maybe a picture of a hand or a picture of that clay pot, for example.
Yes, it 100% is. Just like any sketch image in desktop SolidWorks, you can do the same thing in xShape. The only reason I didn't for this is because I actually used my hand as a reference. You know, I was modeling with the mouse in my right hand and just looking at my left hand at first. And yeah, the only difference is I think I made my fingers a little less fat in this model. Shaved off a couple pounds, but
Wait, hold on, John. What if you want to model a right hand? How would you do that?
So we have symmetry, and that's what I've done. So to get both hands, to get both of them, I just turn on symmetry. Now you got two. Now you got a left and a right.
Just mirrored over. Okay, perfect.
Mirrored over. Yeah. And that's how I had to. That's what I had to do to get the sculpture going because I needed a left hand and a right hand. I only made one, so I turned on symmetry, got myself a right hand, and yeah, that's how it went.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for the questions in the chat. Keep them coming. We like a lot of the questions. So, but yeah, go ahead, John. I'll stop interrupting you.
No, all good. All good. We're wrapping up soon. So my number 4 tip, just tried to come up with a silly name for each of these. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Basically, reuse your sub D bodies, your sub D surfaces. Okay. And what I mean by that is when I first started coming up with this idea, I started with the same hand you just saw. And all I wanted to do is put it in a bunch of different positions to see what I liked. And then I ended up with 2 positions that I thought, maybe a vase could fit in that. And it's like pouring water. So that's what I did next. But I want to show you how I was able to do that with multiple different versions, you know, all within the same component. And they're called ordered geometrical sets, or OGSs. So I'm going to call them OGSs from here on out. But it's basically, they're like a separate string of features and bodies that coexist in the same component. So you can have almost like multiple different trains of thought with your different features. In this case, I almost use them like folders for the different bodies that I have. But the cool thing about it is when I insert this new OGS, how I'm going to start from the same point is I'm just going to copy and paste the subdivision surfaces from one into the other, and I'll just work in the new one so that I always have the old one to fall back on. So I'll copy. Smart. Yeah, that's how I ended up with so many different hands. You'll see at the end of this one that I have a bunch of different hands in different positions. And I use of course, the shortcuts Control C, Control V work great to paste your models right in here. And then, yeah, it doesn't look like it's 2 because it puts it right over the same place. But now we have 2 hands. We got 2 hands in this model, and now I can start, you know, manipulating one and turning it from just a straight hand into an actual position of a hand. And now I end up with all these variations. As I just fast forwarded through this, I got a bunch of different hands in different positions, and yeah, I'll walk through them with you. So I got one hand just kind of like, I don't know what you call that. One that's like almost like grabbing motion. I got one holding an apple there. The apple is a separate OGS, separate sub D surface. But that was a cool one. I might do something else with that later. We'll see.
That's cool.
I got a thumbs up. Got a hang loose, the pinky and the thumb.
Tubular.
And then pointing, just the index pointing. And
it's like the Michelangelo painting. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the fingers, the what is it? Creation of David? I don't know what it's called.
I don't know what it's called. Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So I want to take a quick pottery break to show you just start to finish how I made this, how I made the vase. And I just started with a cylinder instead of a square this time. I added a crease, just a lot of shifting back and forth from different views. And yeah, then I just added kind of like a little spout at the end. and yeah, I kind of like the style. So after I was happy with that, I just put it all together. I had to extrude more out of the wrist of my right hand here so I could turn it into an arm. But that's the only thing that I haven't really shown you so far. At this point, it's finesse. It's pushing and pulling, it's refining, it's trying to position everything right so it looks realistic. And that's all we're doing. We're positioning and we're refining.
Yeah, that looks great, and it's very manageable. I mean, that's seems like something that even I could do. So that's pretty cool.
You can do that, Mark.
Back to the chat. Jesse says the OGSs are so handy. Thanks for that, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Gotta love
yeah.
the
So
jokes.
how did you hollow out the inside of that though?
Oh, you just missed it. I just shelled it out. So you can use the shell command on any knitted surface. So I made sure that all my sub-D surfaces were knitted. So I shelled out the base. I combined them together. And then all I'm doing here at the end is I'm splitting them using that surface I have behind, the pink one.
Okay.
And I just remove those bodies after. And now here's the point where, I have the design. I started rendering it, or I should say Jesse started rendering it for me using Visualize Connected. But yeah, this is the point where I need to start figuring out how I'm going to take this thing apart. I'm going to split it up into pieces that I can 3D print and actually get this thing created, because I've done too much work for this not to become real at this point.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
Thank you.
Cool. So a couple quick question here from Ernst. So he says, can the skin be connected to a kind of internal bone 3D sketch, like to enable equations? So I guess it's like if there's like to move maybe the fingers and stuff, like could you attach it to like some sort of structure so that you could say, okay, that needs to be 30 degrees or something like that?
So not exactly like a bone structure like you're thinking, but you can definitely attach parts of the subdivision geometry. Like you can take an edge or a face or a series of vertices and you can attach them to a plane or to sketch segments that have, the precise location you want it to be. So It is possible to get that precision. Just not, I don't know if I would do that with this particular project, just because it's a little bit more, it's not so paramount. It's more artistic. It doesn't have to be precise, but if I needed something very precise, you can definitely get that using sketches and planes and attaching different parts of your sub-D geometry to the rest of your parametric geometry in the part.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of the cool things about xShape, and something that it took me a little bit to wrap my head around, again, coming from parametric software like SolidWorks, where every parameter is critical and crucial. Even though the geometry you're creating in xShape is very accurate, just like the geometry you're creating in SolidWorks is very accurate, it's kind of a different approach to, how you're going to be creating something. It is more of sort of like an artistic, attitude towards, creating something where it goes more by like look and feel. And at first for me, that was a little uncomfortable. It was like, okay, like, is it really going to be, axisymmetric or whatever? But in some cases, like,
right.
You don't necessarily need that. Like your spout, that was just sort of like a feel. It's like, this is kind of the right angle and shape for this, right?
Exactly. It gives you that freedom, but you can still get the precision you need when you're ready to, attach a dimension to it, which is pretty much the only things I didn't show today was how to make it super precise, because there are a lot of other tools that Jordan Tadic, our other xShape experts, will go into. But since this was more about art and the artistic side of engineering, I figured I'd leave that out and focus on this today. But it's totally possible to get the precision surfaces you need.
Yeah, these were some excellent tips. I mean, especially for somebody like me, I've dabbled in xShape, but I mean, this is, really going to take my productivity in this tool to a whole nother level. So appreciate those 5 tips you gave us.
Well, I got one last one we didn't get to, but don't worry, this is the quickest one. Okay,
we only did 4 so far?
Yeah, that was just 4. This is number 5.
Let's do 5.
Don't worry, I'll shut up soon, Mark. We're almost done. So number 5, refine your design. And when I say refine, I really mean with the cage that we showed earlier. So This is a quick one. I just want to show you how refining it is so important. So say I am using one of the advanced tools like arc bend here, which is a great tool, especially for bending fingers. The cage here, you can see I have intersecting surfaces because I can't see edges in there. And in general, if the cage doesn't look that great, like if the cage looks really ugly and if the cage doesn't look somewhat realistic, it's not going to look the way you want it to in the end. So what I spend most of my time in xShape doing with the more artistic things in here is I spend like the majority of the time just in the cage view, fixing it up so that it looks, you know, a little bit more realistic. So I have I've got a little bit of time here that I just recorded me doing different things to try and get this thing into more of the shape that I'm looking for and get rid of those intersecting surfaces. There is a tool for finding the interfering surfaces if you need to use that, but if you spend enough time in the cage, you're going to find any problematic issues like that anyway. But yeah, it's just, you know, the cage isn't always going to look perfect, but the closer you can get to the cage looking right, the better off your design is going to look. You know, it looked like my fingers were getting a little too rounded there, so I need to flatten those out so you can see some more of the, so you can see that knuckle a little bit more, see the difference between, you know, the surface of where the top of your pinky ends goes into a knuckle and then goes into a totally new surface at like your last digit, you know, where your fingertips are. And that's pretty much it. There's not too much to say about refining your design, and it's kind of hard to show because it's difficult for me to like show you a model that hasn't been changed, you know, in the cage, hasn't been refined, and then show you one after. But I promise you, if you spend time in the cage view, you refine your design, you can make just about anything. And that's really goes for all these tips. If you master the robot, if you select like a pro, if you start simple, use the minimal loops and vertices you need, if you reuse and recycle your designs, and you put the time into refining your design, especially in the cage, I promise you can make just about anything with xShape. And that is what I will leave you with today. Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I hope that you learned something. Sounds like you might have, but
I learned a lot, man. And I'm really excited to go and try these in xShape. I know a lot of people watching are probably pretty excited to give it a shot too. John, do you know, like, is there a way for them to try it out? Like, is there like a website they can go to or something like that?
I'd say the best way is if you're a maker to get into xShape right now. And yeah, if you're a maker, start using xShape. We don't have currently a way for us to try it, and you know, at the moment, but we are working on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so you know, stay tuned for that. Maybe if we figure that out, we'll put it in the description below. If we find a link for that, we'll put it down there. But yeah, thanks so much, John. That was awesome. I definitely learned a lot. So yeah, I guess we'll just close out the show real quick. Thanks again for being on.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah. So again, thanks everyone for joining in and participating in the chat. I think we got through, you know, all the questions and that sort of thing. It's been a lot of fun. I wanted to give a quick shout out to some of the people helping us out in the production side of things today: Andrew, Ian, and Jesse. This wouldn't have gone as smoothly without them. Thanks again to Gian for doing live design today. And so, yeah, just in closing, just wanted to talk about what's coming up next for SolidWorks Live and SolidWorks Live Design. So on May 13th, we're going to have a behind the scenes with Michael Steves, behind the scenes of the Lid Boss project, where he did a drop test simulation. And this is a pretty incredible drop test simulation of the packaging for this Lid Boss design. And you know, I always like the drop tests. I think they're really interesting. And not only that, but it is so important to you know, streamlining your manufacturing process. I mean, if you create something, you know, you still need to deliver it to the end user, to the customer, and packaging is going to be a big part of that. You know, and it has the same sort of engineering challenges and constraints that you would think for anything else. So, you know, you want to make sure that the packaging is robust enough to protect what's inside, but not so heavy that it's going to cost you a lot to ship it. So that's going to be, excuse me, coming up on May 13th. Make sure that you check us out for that. And the next SolidWorks Live is going to be about prototype to production. So a 3D Experience Works story with Lid Boss as well. So that's going to be Thursday, May 19th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So head over to our YouTube channel. Make sure to set a reminder for that. So when that comes up, you'll be able to view it. And while you're there, why not check out some of our other videos? Today has been pretty cool. We've been sort of talking about this concept of, engineering and art, but we have other live designs even. One that comes to mind is Brad Williamson. He's a drummer, professional drummer, does that quite a lot. He's excellent, and he did a live design where he shows us how a drum pedal is created and built and assembled. So, a lot of really interesting and fun concepts that we do on this show. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. And again, thank you guys so much for joining. If you don't mind, hit that like button for us. Go ahead and subscribe, share this with another coworker or somebody that you think might find some of this stuff really cool and interesting. So until next time, it's been a pleasure. Have a good one.